So, what is the oldest protected area in Earth history? Does anyone know a kind of protected area? Ask a
I
different
would guess
question.
it's a religious site somewhere in the Middle East.
That's a good guess. This site's even older than any human religion, though. This goes back 250,000 years. As a matter of fact, it's not even human. It's a pre-human site. I just discovered it on a National Geographic special in South Africa, where the Homo naledi made a cave, a really inaccessible cave. I recommend the documentary on Netflix, to have a burial ground. And they probably chose that location to protect their burial ground from, I don't know who, maybe animals digging up. But anyway, um, there are many different kinds of protected areas that have emerged throughout human history. And in this course, we're going to look around the world and look in Costa Rica especially to figure out why do some why do they emerge and based on what kind of values, uh, who managed them and how were they managed throughout time, be one of the biggest predictions. Now, how many of these different kinds of protected areas can we see in Costa Rica today? Obviously, we're not going to see 250,000-year-old burial grounds. So we'll talk about the ones that we can't see. And these are some of the big questions that we're going to investigate in this really unique course. I don't say unique just because it's ours. I say it's unique because nobody else that I'm aware of studies the evolution of protected areas throughout history and how protected areas have evolved in response to the values in society at the time, or pre-society in the case of the one I just mentioned. And of course, Costa Rica is probably maybe the best place in the world to study this because, well, as you probably know, it's very tourist friendly. It has a noted history in protected areas and biodiversity conservation. And there's such a diversity of places, a diversity of different kinds of protected area regimes in such a small place. So we can get to quite a few of them in relatively quick time. But before going into the details about the course, let me show you where we're planning on visiting. And for that, look at the shared screen here. Now, for anyone who doesn't know where in the world Costa Rica is, it's right there, halfway between the United States and South America. Now, this is our itinerary. We're going to be landing in the San Jose, which is the capital city, national international airport, and we're going to make our way across the country and then depart from the other international airport on the other side so that we don't have to come back. So let's see some of these spots along the way. First, we're going to go to Tirambina Biological Reserve, one of the oldest private reserves in the country. This is the lowlands, the Caribbean lowlands. So kind of represents the image many people have of the tropics, with monkeys and sloths and all kinds of birds, humid and hot or warm anyway. It's a nonprofit and also a for-profit. The entire management of this 200-hectare reserve comes from ecotourism funding. So we'll get to see ecotourism in action. Tirambina is also a member of our organization, the PUP Global Heritage Consortium, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. So we have close relationships with them, and that allows us to speak to some of the managers behind the scene, which will be a characteristic of this course to the degree possible, speaking to the managers, not just seeing the tourism side of these sites. After that, and pretty much across the street, is the Selva Biological Station. This is perhaps the most famous neotropical biological station in the world, or certainly in the neotropics. And it's owned by an organization called the Organization for Tropical Studies, which has also been around for over 60 years and is integral to the history of conservation protected areas in Costa Rica. This biological station has produced an incredible amount of seminal research on how tropical ecology and biology work. So this is really historically a very important place to visit. The pictures you see here are actually students of mine from when I taught at the University of Costa Rica, visiting the site. So after we move on from those two, which you can see are represented by the blue segment in our itinerary, we head west to go to La Fortuna, which is the adventure capital of Costa Rica, the tourism adventure capital of Costa Rica. And the first place we're going to visit is Mystico Park. Mystico Park is a family-owned for-profit conservation site consisting of a series of 16 different bridges. Some of them are hanging bridges and some of them are not suspension bridges, many of which allow you to have an amazing view of Arenal volcano, which you can see in the back behind the students from our pilot course early this year in January from the University of Montana. It's actually 3 universities represented in that group. Most of them are from Montana. One was from Arizona State, and one of them, a doctoral student, is from Clemson. So we'll get to see a different kind of management regime, a for-profit, family-owned, kind of mass ecotourism, if you allow me that term. And almost across the street, we have another ecotourism, which is very just the opposite of mass. This is also family-owned, for-profit conservation, but the emphasis here is wellness, the fusion of the wellness of the forest and the wellness of the visitors. So it's a very kind of postmodern, kind of progressive approach to offering visitors food, doing different kinds of activities. Like you can see the mud on the face, the mud facial, yoga activity. So it's a real interesting combination of conservation and human wellness, human and nature wellness. And this too is also a member of our organization. So we get special treatment here. The gentleman you see putting the essence of mint oil on the students' hands is the owner and the director. And we'll get to meet him personally. So then we'll continue on around Arenal Lake or reservoir, which is a man-made electrical for hydroelectricity. And we'll go to the world famous Monteverde Cloud Forest Reserve. This is one of the most famous sites in all of Costa Rica. It goes back, it may be the very first protected area, at least formally protected, started by Quakers in the 50s. And the Monteverde Cloud Forest Reserve, which is owned and managed by the Tropical Science Center, which is the most venerable and oldest and probably most important conservation organization here in Costa Rica. They've done a lot of innovative work. And in fact, our nonprofit has a close relationship with them. We have a cooperative agreement to do research, develop new kinds of tools for management. We may talk about the condition-based zoning tool that we devised with them. We'll be doing, as you can imagine here, a night walk. And once again, you can see our Montana students. So this is a cloud forest. It's higher up. You see a lot of clouds, much cooler. So this is the point where we need to bring at least a light jacket on this trip. After spending, I believe, a couple nights here, we will then head out west to Guanacaste, which is much warmer and drier most of the year. It certainly will be in January when we get there. And you can see we're heading towards the town and county of Ojanja. Now, it's interesting because Ojanja, the entire county, is covered or composed of a model forest. There is an international model called a model forest. It was originally from Canada, and now there are chapters or applications around the world. The Chorotega model forest is the one here. The idea here is to take a landscape-based approach. So the model forest includes several protected areas, but it also includes the towns and everything in between. So it's a more holistic approach to managing biodiversity, managing natural resources. So really good for the landscape architects present here. And once again, you can see our students. Now, within this, we will get to see it from a high up location to get the big picture view, but then we'll go down and visit a couple spots within the Chorotega model forest, including the Matambu indigenous territory. The Matambu is the only Chorotega group left. Chorotega is an indigenous name referring to a group. And as they like to point out, they're the only indigenous territory in a blue zone in the whole world. And I imagine you've all heard of a blue zone. That's one of those few areas around the world where people oftentimes live over 100 because of the lifestyle. So here, when we visit Matambu, we'll get to learn a little bit about their culture, doing some different kinds of activities, taking a walk to the waterfall, and appreciating a little bit about indigenous management of protected areas, even though this is a private protected area. We'll also visit Monte Alto Reserve within the model forest. This is another interesting one because it's part community and it's part national government. So it's a co-management site. And we'll be there for a very short period of time, but we'll get to see that a number of different co-management models in Costa Rica. Then we'll head north along the green segment towards Liberia, which is one of the large cities and also where the international airport is. And we'll be entering the Guanacaste Conservation Area, which is a World Heritage Site for natural heritage. Yet again, a different kind of management regime having this designation. It's not just a title, it does imply certain aspects. You may have all heard of World Heritage nominated on the UNESCO World Heritage List. And the Guanacaste Conservation Area itself has a long, innovative history, unlike any of the other conservation areas. And I should mention Costa Rica has innovative because in 1988 created the conservation area system, where like the model forest is a landscape-based approach. It took the entire surface area of the country and divided up into 11 conservation areas. And again, the idea was to decentralize management to these different areas and to have an integrated approach where you're not just focused on the protected area, but you're focused on all the area around the protected area and all the other land uses. So this was considered very innovative in its time. It probably still is because there don't know too many other countries that have an approach like this. We'll be visiting Santa Rosa National Park, which while it is noted for its biology, its dry deciduous forest, it also has one of the most important historical sites in the country, very important for the national independence of Costa Rica. It's a battle site, actually, which you can see on the left here. So we will take in both the cultural and the natural aspect of this national park. Not far away, still within the Guanacaste Conservation Area, we'll be visiting Rincon de la Vieja National Park. Now, this is a fabulous park because of its geological activity. The volcano is active, although we won't be near the volcano. And there's a lot of geological activity along a very diverse trail that we're going to be walking on. You can see a little bit of the steam coming up at one of the spots along this trail. And you can see in the lower left, the person drinking the water bottle is our Costa Rican naturalist, who I don't think was able to make it today. And also the professor, I don't think she is in the picture with the backpack and the maroon hat. That's Dr. Thompson, who is traveling right now and couldn't come to this webinar either. Still in the Guanacaste Conservation Area, we're going to the Junquillal Wildlife Refuge, which is a coastal wildlife refuge. And this too is a site that has a high degree of co-management. There's a local community group that manages all of the tourism aspects within it, and hopefully we'll be able to talk with them. We actually had a lesson right here on the beach. Beautiful beach. The wildlife refuge is connected to the Santa Elena Bay Marine Management Area, which is one of the newest marine areas. And we'll be going on a boat tour with the park director or administrator through this bay to understand a little bit more about marine management issues and coastal marine management issues. So this is not something we did last year, but by popular demand, we added this marine component to it. So that pretty much concludes, that's 15 days from the 3rd of January to the 5th. Well, it's not 15, it's 14 days. And we return, you would fly home on the 15th of January, just in time for the beginning of spring semester in most universities in the United States. And there's the airport. So that's a brief overview. So we do cover a lot of diversity. We do visit 3 sites that are members of our organization. National parks, wildlife refuges, so a number of the different categories in the protected area system, both private and non-private, a little bit of indigenous, So, and we could add more, but we don't want to tire folks out too much. So I'm going to stop sharing that itinerary, tell you just a little bit about the PUP Global Heritage Consortium. We're a nonprofit. We've been around since the late 90s. Our mission is to support communities around natural cultural heritage areas to better manage that heritage. And we try to do that from a holistic perspective. And one aspect of a holistic perspective is to look at evolution over time and how protected areas respond and emerge based on different values and different kinds of societies. So that's kind of the take here. And we will be looking at different tools. We really love tools at the PUP Consortium for managing natural cultural heritage, especially with communities. Having said that, my next stop in this webinar is to go over the syllabus, which is a little bit more of the nitty-gritty of what we are actually going to encounter. This is an academic course. It is a 4-credit course. That is 4, and it's 4 credits. And those credits can be transferred from the University of Montana to any university in the world that'll accept them. They have a mechanism for doing that. So the course itself is kind of property of the nonprofit, but we are doing it, we did it last year and coming year in association with the University of Montana, which means that they fully vet the course. They give both an undergraduate and a graduate, what do you call that, course number. They vet all the academic aspects, which we'll see in the syllabus in just a moment, just first. Of course, the course has to meet all their requirements in terms of safety and security, risk management, the different rules that we have, the academic codes of honor, behavior codes, all of these meet the requirements of the University of Montana, and sometimes we exceed them in certain areas. So let me now share with you the syllabus. And certainly we're a small group, so if anyone has a question, don't need to wait till the end. Just jump in and put your camera on, raise your hand, whatever you like to do to get my attention. So I'm going to hit the main features of the syllabus in the Study Abroad course. You can see the cover, right? Just want to confirm. It looks good. All right. So there's a picture from Terrambina Biological Reserve, which actually has the longest suspension bridge in Costa Rica. So the purpose of the course is to provide students with unique space to study the global evolution of protected area management and conservation models within a holistic management framework by a highly qualified local team, as well as the professor from the University of Montana, Dr. Thompson. I believe she's the director of the program on parks, conservation, and recreation at the University of Montana. The objectives: appreciate not only the diversity of protected area and their management models in the world, but also the evolutionary emergence of new values, a little bit of how values emerge in human society and how those values affect all aspects of society, including protected areas, which is our area. So provoke thought about different management actions and strategies in different types of protected areas. And tourism will be certainly one of the principal areas that we'll be looking at, just by the nature of visiting and the different offerings of these different sites. Understand the general natural history and array of protected areas in Costa Rica, so you'll get a good dose of the natural history, the biogeography of Costa Rica. Our naturalist himself is an expert, well-known birder in Costa Rica, as well as a longtime tour guide. Very good English. And of course, have an enjoyable experience when the students visit communities and the different sites. So there will be required reading. There will be, I think, some 3 quizzes. We will have no more than 1 class per day. At the end of the course, I think this probably says it elsewhere, so I'm jumping ahead a little bit. There is a final presentation where students think about, take a site or a protected area somewhere in the world that they're very interested in, and they apply the theory to that site, looking at their values, understanding what kind of management and how that management could be improved with the adoption of new values. And then they'll write a paper that would be submitted after that, after they get back to their home countries. So the logistics, up to 16 students. The price includes everything in country, includes insurance that's provided by the University of Montana, the credit transfer fee back to your university. It doesn't include airfare, but pretty much everything else. Outside the country transportation, personal medicines and personal items, of course, you would bring that down. I didn't mention that the PUP Consortium is a 501c nonprofit registered the IRS, and we are incorporated in the state of Colorado. So there's our official course number and title that's recognized. The teaching methodology, well, obviously there's a lot of hands-on. We'll be analyzing the sites, doing some reading prior to, hopefully prior to your arrival. Not going to be a lot of time to read while you're down here. And like I said, one class at the most per day, and it's not even every day. Some days we're spending time traveling, so we'll have no formal classwork, and the quizzes, and the final presentation and the paper. The evaluation, participation in dialogues, it could be a number of different dialogues, 2 reading quizzes, final presentation, final paper, overall engagement, and daily journaling, where we give the students prompts to focus in on important aspects that we're covering each day. And certainly the syllabus you can read in more detail. You probably all have visited the course site website already, or webpage. If there are any doctoral students or graduate students, I should say, we do ask a bit more of them, leading dialogues, longer paper, looking at more than one site. So there in the green shirt is our naturalist. This is one of our classes that's going on in Tirambina. We'll give a packet of reading materials in advance that'll all be digital. Basically, I went over the itinerary in general terms. Here it's much more specific, what we'll be doing in the morning, afternoon, and night, giving an idea of the time, the number of nights we're staying at different sites. Certainly, if I have any specific question, I'm not going to go over that now. You've seen the map. Similarly, in the program of studies, you can see exactly here what are the different topics that we're going to cover at each site. Some of the class learning objectives and readings that correspond to each site. The logos of those different places. And again, this goes over what I already went, but in a little bit more detail so you can get an idea of the academic aspects. When the reading quiz will be, important to know. And I mentioned here, for example, on the 8th of January, there is no classes. We're spending all the time in the field. And on the beach, at least a couple times. And also for your edification, there's a little more information on the different sites. Most of these sites have information on the internet, but you can see the very least what kind of management they have here with some supporting notes. These are different categories of protected, large categories over civilization, the history of civilization, indigenous sacred spaces. You may have heard of the paradigm of fortress conservation back in the day when it was imposed on local communities. Rich people from Europe would set up these, and in the United States as well. There's still examples of fortress conservation in the world. State or single institution controlled, when still top-down, government controlled. And then as new values, more postmodern values, management becomes more participatory, inclusive, power sharing, and then eventually even becomes property control of communities themselves. So obviously these are very big categories, big buckets, but to give you an idea, perhaps from the oldest to the newest. By saying old doesn't mean doesn't exist anymore. There are still many indigenous sacred spaces all around the world. And Dr. Erasmi, I met him through a colleague of mine who is a academic working on sacred spaces and conservation, who was on the board of our organization. So there's some bios on myself. And I should say that I'm particularly very interested on holistic thinking, especially as it applies to protected area and heritage management. I am a dual citizen. I was born in the United States. I married into Costa Rica. My wife is Costa Rican, a professor at the University of Costa Rica, in the ecotourism department, actually. And I became naturalized in 2015. I live here full time and have been here since 2006. I was also a Peace Corps volunteer here in the early to mid 1990s, where I worked at the National Zoo. So protected areas, environmental, education, management, visitor management. That has been my career trajectory. And Dr. Thompson, Associate Professor in the Department of Society and Conservation, Director of Parks, Tourism, and Recreation Management Program. And she also has worked around the world, done quite a bit of work in Africa, actually. So she definitely can bring that international experience to the fore. And then Cesar Sanchez, whom I mentioned to you, is a very experienced naturalist, birder, and tour guide, especially has experience in macaws and parrot conservation, although his knowledge is much broader than that. Some activity, and of course, an annotated bibliography of some of the resources, or most of the resources that we'll likely be looking at. So let me stop that. Does anyone have questions at this point? I mean, I can share a few more logistical things, but if not, John.
Yeah,
Oh,
I have
yes.
a quick question.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, this is very interesting, John, really. I was wondering whether I understand this course is going to be offered within the first half of January, and I was wondering if you consistently offer this in January. For example, if a student misses the upcoming trip, can he or she count for the other January 2026 or something?
Sure. Well, we've offered the pilot course in January of this year. So this is the second edition of it. We're also offering different foreign study courses with the University of Tennessee, which is not on this theme, it's on a different theme. So I can't guarantee that we'll be offering this next year. It may be that we'll offer it every 2 years. We'll have to wait and see what the demand. Course is not filled yet. So it's likely, but I should mention it's open to any university student in the world, whether they're undergraduate or graduate. So if a student misses it, this year, as long as they're still enrolled, then they can, and there's a reason to receive credits, then they can still take it in a future year.
Awesome, thank you.
So yes, it would be from the 3rd to the 15th. We do have 2 important documents that anyone who's seriously interested should review. That's on our website. There's our policy document, which goes over all of our different policies, and the emergency prevention and response plan, which deals with the health issues. And I believe the policy document, or both of them, have recommended things that you would bring, a packing list. But we will have another info webinar with the students who are actually going, where we go into the details of what they should pack and how they should prepare and things like that. In terms, maybe I'll go to that website just to show you the content on it. Easy enough to do. I see another Thompson here. Might be a member of the same family, perhaps.
That is correct. I'm sorry, I had to work late.
Your family is well represented here, though, so no problem.
It looks like an amazing opportunity.
We think so. I'm biased, but we spent an awful lot of time planning and putting it together, and we learned a lot in the pilot course. So this one's going to be much better, even still. This is the page, the course page. And you can see the registration, the dates, the price, $3,350. And like I mentioned, that covers everything except for airfare. the introduction, some background resources on Costa Rica, the syllabus, which I just briefly went over, the course policy document, the emergency prevention and response plan, the visual tour that I just showed. And I highly recommend that you check out the course video. This is a kind of a documentary of the pilot course. It was produced by the doctoral student from Clemson University and gives you a pretty good overview if you have 14 minutes of the things that we did then and some student testimonials and how the course changed them and biographies there. So we did extend the deposit date. It was October 1st. So the deposit is 25%, and there's a register button in the syllabus. There's a register button on that page, and the registering process, the application asks a whole bunch of different questions to start us down that path. It also allows, the page itself has a mechanism for receiving the deposit. And then by the end of this month, we would need the balance. But once you do the deposit, then I'll talk to you about the balance. So we're just a little bit behind schedule, which is why this tight time window, as some of you, as one person, I guess, already noticed, Ariel mentioned. And I apologize for that time crunch. It has to do mostly with having enough students to offer the course. So that's where we're at. And now, if anyone else have, that's all I had planned to share with you. I imagine there's quite a few questions bubbling up in your minds. There should be. I'm sure I didn't want to cover everything, and we left some time for that for anyone who'd like to ask.
Hey John, this is the other John. Is it definitely a go for this, or do you need so many more students to
We're still
participate?
We still need a few more students to hit the minimum. So it's not
what,
but until people make deposits, that's what we need to know to confirm the number of students.
Okay, and then if the deposit's made, and then unfortunately, if you're unable to do this,
we'll return the whole thing without penalty immediately.
Okay.
No financial risk.
Okay. And then when is the due date for the deposit? I'm sorry, what date was that?
Well, I mean, ultimately we need
soon.
the end of the month for the full payment. So the deposit is kind of a floating date. Flexible. It was October 1st because we don't have enough students yet. I would say within the next week or two.
Okay.
That way we'll make the go, no go decision at the latest, the end of the month.
Okay. I also had a question about just the logistics. If about Joel or the students, it looks like they have to be there on the 3rd of January by 12 o'clock. And then
someplace.
Was that?
I don't remember the actual hour, but that's about right. So
Okay.
if a student can't make it, because that is pretty early, they would need to come the day before, stay at a hotel.
Okay.
So that we wouldn't have multiple pickups. Now, if
Right. And
late, of course, then we will make arrangements to make sure that any late student is taken care of properly.
okay. And we could work with you on like hotels that you'd recommend or whatever for that if he came in a day early or stayed a day late or whatever. Okay.
I highly
Thank
recommend
you.
the Holiday Inn Express at the airport in San Jose. It's right next to the airport. That's what we used last time as a meeting place, and it's got good accommodations.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Otherwise, the student would have to make their way to that hotel if they were to choose another hotel nearby. But it's negotiable. If it's not far away, I suppose we could pick up at another hotel too.
Okay. And then when I was looking at airline tickets before, there was something about one of the connections was through Panama City, Panama. Are there any concerns with that you would recommend or any concerns with travel?
No, none. I mean, just make sure you make your connections. Copa Airlines has its base in Panama City. And Panama is actually a bigger airport than Costa Rica's is. And it's a perfectly good airline, so there's no problem there.
Okay, thank you. I was looking at it, I was like, I just want to make sure there wasn't any complications or anything.
Nope. No. People can come on any airline, and people did last year because, you know, they're coming right off of Christmas time. So they're in different places, usually at home, not at the campus. So obviously everyone can't come in on the same flight. And we track all the flights, so we know where everybody is at all times in case there's a delay. Other questions, concerns, or? And John, if you really want to come, we can talk. I don't know if Joel would like that, but
Joel would not like that. I'd have to come under a different name, but I
well,
can
then
do that too.
fine, but you'd have to yeah, we could have to find us separate accommodations and maybe a mask.
John, maybe I missed it
Yeah.
in the presentation or in the other materials, but what are the accommodations usually like? Are they hotels? Are they yurts? Are they
That's a good
tents?
question. Actually, they are described in one of the documents. There's a description of each place that we go to, but it does vary. Tirambina has, they call it their eco hotel. It's kind of higher end. Monteverde, it's more rustic. We'll be staying in a couple conventional hotels just because of convenience. The most rustic place would be, see, not Wellness Park. We're not too rustic. Actually, we're staying at a nice eco lodge as well next to Rincon de la Vieja. So nothing too rustic. I mean, nothing too primitive would be a better word.
Yeah, I don't mind roughing it a little bit, so, but it sounds like I won't have to even think about that. I was just thinking about more like packing, like what kinds of, I mean, you wouldn't have to pack any special
Equipment.
sleeping bags or equipment or anything
No,
like
no,
that.
there's no sleeping bags. There is a packing list in the materials, either in the policy document or in the emergency plan. I think it's the policy document, but no, there's nothing bulky like that. We do recommend that people bring a backpack rather than a suitcase if they can, to make, you know, movement easier. Not every place is like walk up to the front door.
Yeah.
But if someone does have problem, we did have a person with an injury last year. There's more than enough people to help carry luggage if necessary. The driver or the staff are more than happy to move that for a student. So
Yeah, it looks like an amazing trip.
we're hoping. So folks, if there's anyone else you know who wanted to potentially come tonight and couldn't make it, I will actually, I don't have your emails. So if you want me to send you a copy of this, or I can actually post, I suppose, on the webpage, a YouTube link to this in case you want to share it with anybody. So if no one has any other questions or concerns, you certainly can email me. I think the email is at the bottom of the syllabus. You probably already have my email. And the brochure, and the bottom of the brochure is my email as well. You can just send a note and I'll respond to you immediately with any concerns, questions that you may have. Well, then, thank you very much to the Thompson family, to Blake, and to Ariel and Erasme from Brevard College in South Carolina, is it? Or North Carolina? North Carolina.
North Carolina.
So you guys were able to largely escape Helene, or not so much?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yes, Eddie. Yeah, go ahead.
I live actually in South Carolina. I commute to North Carolina. I know a lot of my area had power out. I know Brevard had power loss for a while, as well as cell loss for about cellular and internet loss for about a week.
Oh, wow.
So, but we're luckier than most. So,
Well, good. I'm glad you're able to connect here. Well, great. Well, thank you all for coming. Hopefully we'll be in contact soon. I'll stick around if anyone has any.
Bye, everyone.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
You too.
Bye, John.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.